Welcome to EB-5 Investment Voice, where attorney insights intersects with immigration investments. If you are a foreign investor, domestic fund manager, or enterprising entrepreneur and want to get the most out of the EB-5 program, you have come to the right place. I'm Mark Deal, and I'll be your co-host on this journey. I'm joined by your host, Mona Shah, and other attorneys at Mona Shah Associates, as well as immigration leaders from around the world. So let's get into EB-5 Investment Voice.
Mona Shah, congratulations on 50 episodes.
They went by really quickly, Mark, right?
It seems that way. We've been doing this for a couple of years, but 50 episodes, that's quite a milestone. And I know we've covered a ton of topics in that time. Even today's show, we're talking about E2 to EB-5. We've mentioned a little bit about how E2 can be converted into EB-5 and a little bit of that. But I know we're going even deeper into the subject today, right?
Right. Well, all of these 50 topics, we have really touched on EB-5 on all of them. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's been difficult even considering what can we do next. But I don't know, these topics seem to be coming up and up. And this is such a huge deal right now, this whole E2 to EB-5, because basically we do have this issue of retrogression being such a big deal in China. Mm-hmm. And retrogression being, at this point, almost 10 years, people are looking at alternatives.
Exactly.
So we have today, I have Rebecca here.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hey, Rebecca.
Great to be on again.
Happy to have you.
We also have a guest, which we're going to introduce shortly, who's going to introduce to us a little bit more about the Grenada program, which is very important because, again, you're going to say, Mona, this is Grenada, this is Caribbean, this is not EB-5.
You're right. This show is about EB-5, not the Caribbean.
Yeah, well, Mark, we actually it's been very popular because, as you know, the Grenada is an E2 country, but we've had a lot of other lawyers that are out there too, who've recently come up with this E2 to EB-5 as well, right, Mona?
We kind of think we're one of the first, but perhaps not the first, but about a year and a half ago, we did bring out the whole Grenada, take the Grenada passport, and you can now do E2. Let's take a step back. Not every citizen from every country can file for E2, right, Rebecca?
Exactly. It's limited to certain countries, and fortunately for us, Grenada is part of the citizenship by investment, so you can also obtain your passport through that and then file for your E2 in the U.S.
But are all Caribbean countries E2 countries?
No. So Grenada is one. There are others like Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica, but they don't have the citizenship by investment program as Grenada has.
Right. So with Grenada being suddenly the flavor of the month, Mark, we really thought it was a good idea for us to describe a little bit about the whole process. And I'll explain a little bit as well about, what kind of investments required and the credibility of some of the investments. And we work very hard before we even bring a guest speaker on board as to have the right personality and the right person and the right credentials.
That's right. And today, I think we found the right guest to help us tackle this subject. And that is Dr. Christofer Ashby. Not only is he a lawyer, but he has 2 PhDs, one in music and the other in economics. And
so impressive.
Exactly.
So impressive.
Aside from all those doctorates, and Juris Doctorate, if you want to call that a doctorate, he's also an ambassador for the government of Grenada. I'd like to welcome to the show Dr. Christofer Ashby.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be given the opportunity to speak about the country where I grew up so close to my heart, and also the Citizenship Business Investment Program, which is, I think, the thesis of what we're talking about today. So thank you very much for having me, and Mona, thank you also.
Oh, you're welcome, Christopher, because we have looked at a lot of different programs and we've looked at a lot of different projects in Grenada, and you came to us very highly recommended. Again, after a lot of our own due diligence, I think, Rebecca, we were very satisfied with the type of projects that you were producing.
Yes.
So we have looked into this area very carefully because a lot of our clients do rely on us. So we really have looked into all of the projects, well, not all of the projects, but many of the projects which are available right now in Grenada. But Rebecca, I understand that there's an issue here because you can do a project and you can also do just a contribution if you want a passport. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. So there are two options. So you have the $200,000 donation, or you have, it's about a $400,000 at the end investment into a project in Grenada. So Christofer, we would like you to tell us a bit of why should someone choose the investment option over just a donation?
Because it is a lot more money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it ends up being, for a family of four, it ends up being about $120,000 more to invest in a real estate project. And the material difference, what I tell clients, because I'm a licensed marketing agent, my company is, and so if a client really wants a donation route, we don't try to discourage them, we just tell them what the various options are. If the goal is to go to the United States eventually and apply under an E-2 visa, under our E-2 visa treaty, one of the things, and I have significant experience with facilitating the clients attaining or acquiring E-2 visas into the United States with a Grenadian passport, one of the first things that is asked in the interview is, what is your connection with Grenada? Do you own property? Do you have a business? Do you have family? And with the donation route, it's an economic purchase of citizenship.
I like that, Christofer. It's a nice way of saying you've bought it.
With the real estate route, you actually are given at the end of the process a title deed for property, which evidences a physical nexus in Grenada, a permanent residence in Grenada, a permanent residence card, which will have the address of your property, whatever property you purchase in Grenada. You also, if you or the client desires to contribute their ownership into a rental pool, the government, the Ministry of Finance will now, only as of 2 weeks ago, give the applicant a tax identification number. So for many reasons, not excluding the current frenzy with the CRS requirements globally, in addition to FATCA, it allows the clients to truly evidence that they have a tax residence, a physical residence, and a permanent residence, of which you don't necessarily get with a donation. What I tell clients also is, if it's a $120,000 difference, which is what it is more or less, depending on what fees are charged, but with me, it's $120,000 difference. If you look at the $120,000 as the delta, with the return of investment, if you sell your investment for, let's say, $200,000 in 2 years, you've made a 20% return on capital. So a lot of people are looking at, well, what is my total investment amount and what am I going to get back? If you want the passport and the citizenship, and it's an important part of your portfolio for both yourself and your family, the real question is, what is the incremental cost between the donation and the actual real estate investment?
Okay, Christofer, so let's back up for a moment. And Mona, Rebecca, please help me out in understanding. I think where we're going with this is that people that are in China and people that are in India, although they can't come directly into the U.S. under the E-2 program, certainly there's the EB-5 option. But as you mentioned, Mona, there's that retrogression, especially with mainland China. It sounds like there may be a possibility to go to Grenada first and do this, essentially an investment into Grenada for citizenship. And then from there, come to the U.S. under the E-2, and that way you don't have to deal with some of the quotas and the retrogression and things like that. Am I correct? Is that where we're going?
That's absolutely correct, but it gets even better. First of all, you don't, and Christofer can back me on this one, you don't actually have to enter into Grenada. You can, for a Chinese national, for example, it can all be done from China. Mm-hmm. The second thing is the speed. The passport from Grenada takes what, Rebecca?
It takes about 3 to 4 months. So as Mona mentioned, there's no travel for the application process. There's no physical residency requirements. And what's also great about it is that, ease of travel. You have, visa free to over 135 countries, which include Russia and now UAE and those, looking to go into China as well.
Christofer, I think you had something to do with the UAE, right?
Well, we are in the process right now of obtaining visa-free travel between UAE and Grenada. Mm-hmm. I'm very involved in many initiatives that assist us in obtaining additional visa-free travel between Grenada and other countries.
How many countries, by the way, can you go visa-free with a Grenadian passport?
As of December 18th, when Russia is added, it will be 121.
121.
And of the 121, a lot of the other countries tout, 135 or 134, but, the reality is only about 30 of those countries would you want to go to. And I won't mention the countries.
Yeah, but I have to say that for Russia, we as a UK and a US passport holder, we still need a visa.
Exactly.
Yeah, yes. For Grenada, they will not need one. And as I said, UAE is in the works. And we also have visa-free travel between China, which is a very big one for many Chinese nationals coming to Grenada or even not coming to Grenada.
What is the physical residency requirement, Christofer?
None at all.
So you can keep a passport without ever going to Grenada and living there?
That's correct.
Now I see why we're talking about Grenada today.
Yeah, but there's a lot more involved, Mark. It's not just the fact that, yes, Grenada's great. And this is what we're seeing. So many lawyers now, and we're talking about some of the big lawyers, the top 25 lawyers, are talking about this whole deal. It's sparking interest, but at the same time, just like, we have the projects in the US and we have to go and do our due diligence and be careful, this is what's happening in Grenada. There are a lot of not so good projects out there as well. And I think this is one of the points that we really wanted to bring out as to what a person has to do and how much due diligence someone really has to get done as well.
Yeah, so Chris, what we would like to hear from you, as you being a developer yourself, what is it that an investor looking to invest in Grenada, what should they be looking for? What types of projects?
Well, first of all, I want to say that whatever I say, I will attempt to say without any apparent conflict of interest, because I am both a developer, but also I'm asking to opine maybe on something that would, on the risk to individuals.
That's okay. You can toot your own trumpet a little bit. We don't mind.
Okay. All right. Well, fine. Because my academic training has, for some reason, damaged my ability to be a good salesperson. So I work in absolutes that are rather truthful. So taking my development out of the equation or including it in the equation, the main thing that one has to look for in any development, whether it's in Miami, Florida, Chicago, Illinois, or Grenada, West Indies, is does the developer have the domain-specific expertise to deliver, number one. Number two, what are the sources of financing, which I'll come back to? And three, is this a product or a project that will complete in a timely fashion? I will now focus on...
Christofer, so right now, I think Rebecca and I counted about 16 approved projects in Grenada. I think there's more. But of those 16 approved, are those actually 16 projects that one could actually invest on and get a passport?
You could invest in those 16. There are about 8 to 10 that you could invest in, but the reality is they will never be built.
Oh, wow.
Of the total projects that are approved in Grenada, and I'm not speaking just of Grenada. Grenada has done a wonderful job, the government, of controlling the amount of projects that are approved. There are other Caribbean jurisdictions. I know one in particular that has 78 approved projects. Grenada has 16.
Gosh.
Of those 16, 3, maximum 4 will ever be built. That does not mean that developers will not take the investors' money. It does not mean they will get a passport. They will not get a passport. They will simply never be delivered. There's a number of reasons for that. The first is that if a person is looking, a developer, to build a development only using monies or funds that are obtained from the sale of passports, it is an absolute impossibility. And that is because of just, rather than go into the nauseous details about structured finance and timing of payments, you simply have to have very deep pockets to do these.
Is there not a credit facility in Grenada like the way we have in the other countries?
No, banks will not lend against greenfield hospitality or citizenship type products. It just doesn't exist here. Banks, the way they operate in Grenada, are quite old-fashioned, and they simply do not do that. Second is that private equity does not lend to greenfield Caribbean products. It's very, very rare you see private equity involved. Only if, from a distress standpoint, there are precedents, and that precedent is me with my fund buying distressed assets in the Caribbean.
Okay. And this is something which is relative just to Grenada, or do you think that this is a situation in the Caribbean as a whole?
As far as the perception by banks, or you
Right, the banking and the equity.
I think it's Caribbean whole, because one of my favorite quotes by one of my mentors said that there is a propensity for people to run enthusiastically in the wrong direction. And what happens with developers is that the primary or genesis of many so-called developers getting going is they had land that was owned by the family for many years, and all of a sudden they're a real estate developer. They might have a beautiful piece of beachfront property or wherever the location of it is. Property is about 5% of the total equation. I mean, there's so much that goes into a development that it has nothing to do with property. So what happens is you get people with great intentions. Perhaps they see themselves sitting at the hotel bar, having a drink and telling the incoming attractive young women or attractive young men, I own this hotel. There's so much that goes into this whole process that's way beyond the land. The second thing is that you have to have deep pockets or equity partners with deep pockets, because, when an application comes in, let's say the developer receives $300,000. If you're building a $30 million development, you need 100 of these immediately and 1,000 eventually.
Right.
The funds don't come in a synchronous manner. So, you have to have a big passion and a deep pocket to do these sort of things.
It sounds a little like EB-5, actually.
Exactly. So, Christofer, basically, even though you're approved by the government, of Grenada, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a successful project.
No.
But what about some of the, we've seen some stuff during our sort of due diligence exercises, which said that they guarantee, and the word guarantee is basically flashed all over the place, that the project will be built and that the investment will come back, etc.
Well, the guarantee the project will be built, I mean, people can make that guarantee, and that's a soft guarantee. Usually, unless it's specifically stated in the purchase sale agreements or some other documentation, things get built. I mean, if you want to wait 30 or 40 years, I mean, some things will get built. But there are, and it's not just in Grenada, in other jurisdictions in the Caribbean, there are citizenship products that are offering guaranteed returns and guaranteed buybacks. And all I can say is do your due diligence, look very closely at the quality of the guaranteed buyback, the documentation. I mean, who's providing this? I get a lot of investors saying, well, I want a guaranteed buyback. And I'd say the only way a guaranteed buyback is truly a buyback is when the amount in question, including the yield that's being offered, is in an escrow account controlled by a fiduciary who is a non-related party. And on the day the buyback is due, that those funds can be released without any influence by the person who is the either developer and or the funding source. Otherwise, these guaranteed buybacks are not feasible. It sounds great. They're a great sales tool. I wish I could say I'll give you a guaranteed buyback.
Yeah.
But, if it sounds too good to be true, it's not true. And especially when it comes to real estate.
Right. That's the best mantra. But tell me something, Chris. So if somebody comes into this, they decide that they are going to invest in the Caribbean. They're going to invest in Grenada and they're going to invest in a project like this. Do they get their money back? How do they get sort of paid?
The way they can make income, and again, income on the investment portion. This is the difference between, or just the investment portion is.
So I'm sorry, Krista. So we're talking of an equity contribution, not a loan, correct?
It's an equity contribution. It's not a loan.
Okay, because that's a huge difference. And I think people are used to the whole EB-5 scenario where it's a loan model and you get your entire money back. So equity is different. But equity, technically, you can make more than you actually put in.
Yes, you can. And the way that the short-term yield is that if you contribute your project to the hotel pool or the management pool, there is a return. And the return, I would say conservatively, would be between 1% and 4% on an annual basis. Then, of course, there's the resale possibility. What I've done, I mean, I don't want to go into details of tax, but I've created a structure where is that a secondary buyer could come and purchase the asset. Of course, this is subject to finding buyers to do so. And a lot of the very onerous taxes that would have been levied against individuals who don't have any interest in citizenship and have no intention of applying for could actually purchase or repurchase from the initial buyer their fraction or their condo or their full villa and have a very tax efficient structure. So the returns will be on the upside of the equity and on a return, which of course is subject to occupancy and under the management of the hotel group.
Christofer, do they need to own their investment, the condos or anything that they're investing in for a amount of time before they can do a resale?
Yes, they have to hold the asset for 3 years. And that is interesting. It's 3 years from the granting of the citizenship, which is a very, very critical point. So what if you are investing in something that's greenfield, it's just starting construction, and it's not delivered for 3 years? It's very different that if today you invest in something that's going to be delivered in 2 or 3 months, it's a very different way of looking at the universe, because you have an asset that you can actually use, get income from, and then perhaps in 3 years sell it. So it's very, very different. The timing issue, if you're going to invest in a development, it's good to invest in one that's going to deliver pretty soon, because you have the opportunity to use that asset at the same time, perhaps garner income from that asset. If the asset's not going to be delivered for 2, 3, 4 years, which is the usual timeline to build in the Caribbean, you basically have a dead asset. So at the end of that, you have to sell. Secondly, eventually in Grenada, there will be 3 or 4 projects built. And what will happen in that period of time is a number of individuals who have citizenship who want to sell their asset, who want to sell that and move on after the 3-year statutory holding period. By investing early or investing in products or developments that will, deliver in the next 6 to 8 months, the opportunity to exit is much sooner than the opportunity for people who are simply going to be delivered that asset in 3 years or 4 years. So, there's lots of benefits in getting involved in something that's under construction and that will be delivered in a timely fashion.
Christofer, one question though. Recently we had these devastating hurricanes, which devastate so much of the Caribbean. There is a program in St. Kitts, which is available until March, which is basically halved the amount of citizenship. I believe it was almost 400,000 before, and now it's like 150,000 until March. But I'm not sure how that equates with what's going on in Grenada, because Grenada wasn't really touched by the hurricanes, right?
No, we've had 2 hurricanes in the last 60 years, in 1957 and in 2004. We're below the hurricane belt. Thank God for that. As far as other jurisdictions cutting their prices, one thing that Grenada has done, because we have the E-2 visa treaty with the United States, we have a level of due diligence that is pretty extraordinary. We have to maintain that E-2 visa, which is a very, very, very important treaty for us.
Yes.
And so we're not going to participate in the race to the bottom, which it really is. I mean, you get what you pay for. Grenada's sort of been this, the hermit nation, probably a bad analogy in this political time. We've been sort of the sleeper of the citizenship programs. We haven't done the most. We definitely have the strictest due diligence requirements. And so you get what you pay for. So we have recently reduced the application for a single applicant under the donation, but for a family of 4, it still is the same price. Again, and the other countries that reduced their prices didn't reduce the price of their real estate. They reduced the price of their donation routes. Okay,
and just to clarify, if you do a donation, you don't qualify for the E-2. You would have to do the investment route. What I'm saying is that the precedent that we have seen as far as rejections and acceptances is that if you have a donation, it becomes a materially more difficult, if not impossible, though perhaps probable in certain situations, to obtain an E-2 visa. With the ownership of real estate and the subsequent ability to prove a physical nexus in Grenada, it is much, much easier. And our success has been with individuals who purchase real estate, not with those who purchase donations. Yeah, I think we can, from all that we have seen, we can definitely confirm that is the case.
Well, Christofer, you gave us a lot of great pointers, especially, for investors looking into projects in Grenada. But Mona, the same things that we look for here in whether, going from an E-2 project to an EB-5 project, correct? That we want to, from the beginning, we should be contemplating on what businesses can go from an E-2 to an EB-5.
Right. Well, that's what we have been seeing for the last couple of years for people who are contemplating EB-5. From the very outset, that as soon as they file their E-2, they really need to have in contemplation EB-5 just because of the nature of the project. And it's not that easy to transition from E-2 to EB-5.
Exactly. They do have similarity in that, they're both investor visas. The E-2 gets you your non-immigrant, and whereas the EB-5 gets you your green card. But they're also both at risk projects. So
the whole thing is at risk.
Exactly.
Now, even the Grenada thing is at risk. So
yeah, so it's able to transition, but as you said, you have to contemplate, and it depends on what kind of business you're going into, because you do have to remember EB-5 does require that 10 full-time job requirement. So going into it, and there is a minimum amount of investment as well, whereas the E-2, there's no minimum investment, and then there is no particular job requirement, but you do have to
show viability and the ability not to be marginal. Christofer, what kind of people do you get coming to you who want to file for Grenada citizenship and eventually want to do an E-2 petition?
It's mainly Chinese nationals. We have the occasional individual. We have a couple applicants now from Kuala Lumpur, but it really is Chinese nationals. Those are the individuals that want to. It's always the same box pretty much there. They want to have their children be educated in the United States. The wife or the girlfriend wants to live in the United States with the children.
Or the girlfriend.
Yes. They do not want to be subject to global taxation as a U.S. resident, yet they want to have the benefits of living in the United States without that sword hanging over them. But the goal really is for the children to go and become educated in the United States. So primarily Chinese nationals.
Rebecca, can children on an E-2 visa go to school in the United States?
Yes. So what's great about the E-2 visa is that, okay, if you're coming in with your, younger dependents, of course they can attend school. But what's great about this is that you as a principal applicant can also attend university. You and your spouse can both attend, which works out because now with the China retrogression, those children who are 18, unfortunately will not be able to get into the application process with their parent for the EB-5, but they can get into the E-2, finish school and eventually get into the EB-5 program from E-2.
Yeah, we certainly have a lot to think about with regard to Grenada as a path for the E-2, and then maybe perhaps using that as a path to the EB-5 in the U.S. Christofer, could you tell us a little bit about specifically your projects in Grenada?
Yes. One is the island of Grenada. The second is the island of Carriacou, which is in the Grenadines. The first one, which will be delivered next year, it's 4 villas and 12 condos. And the second phase of that is a 55-room hotel. It has a private marina. I will live there myself. For some reason, the largest villa is mine, and I intend to live there myself.
Not a bad proposition.
Right. It's the interior designer is Adriana Hoyos. I mean, it's top of the top. It's a super high-end luxury development, and it's fully funded. And I put $5 million of my own into it, so it'll definitely get done. Fantastic views, and it's a gorgeous high-security development. The second is on the island of Carriacou in the Grenadines. Most of you have heard of Mystique, or even more, Pirates of the Caribbean. So it's on the island which is near where they shot Pirates of the Caribbean. And that's a 16-villa resort also on a private white sand beach. And that will start in March. So I have 2 of these. And I said I'm going to live in them. I'm involved on a day-to-day basis. I'm getting gray hair from it, but it's a joyous way to age because it's beautiful to see what was once on paper come out of the ground. So, I hope you'll come and visit me.
That's a great point. You mentioned there's no physical residency requirement for investment in Grenada, but it sounds like that residency, could be a pleasant benefit.
It's a gorgeous place to live. It's a safe country, great airlift. Again, I live here. I grew up here. I love it. But again, the best thing is to come and experience it. One of the things I love about my development is that I love Venice, Italy. I spend as much time as I can there. And I created a situation where people who come to the development will come and go by private yacht to the development. So rather than dealing with cars and all this other stuff, you come to development by a private yacht, and you'll come to your villa and meet our butlers and our concierge service, and you don't have to drive around in a car if you don't want to.
Sounds great. I'm located in Atlanta, and I know, Mona, you're up in New York. We're about to start winter. How does that make you feel?
I know. We have to go there. I mean, I think that, right, Rebecca?
Oh, yes. We're making a visit ourselves.
You're all more than welcome.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Christofer Ashby, thank you so much for coming on EB-5 Investment Voice.
You are so welcome, and my pleasure to have the opportunity to speak about that which is dear to my heart, both E-2 and Grenada and development.
Thank you for being with us today on EB-5 Investment Voice. The topics presented in this podcast is informational in nature and is not to be taken as specific legal advice. If you have questions on the topics presented in this episode or other investment immigration needs, please contact Mona Shah Associates. Mona and her attorney staff can be reached at mshawlaw.com. That's MSHAH law.com. Make sure you don't miss our next episode focusing on a different aspect of the EB-5 program by subscribing to the podcast. While you're at it, leave us a rating on iTunes. If you really found this episode valuable, share it with someone else that could benefit from this information. Until then, I'll see you on the next episode of EB-5 Investment Voice.